There are stars who rise, and then there are supernovas that explode into the world and bend reality around them. Kanye West didn't just break into music, he shattered the mold. From the gritty streets of Chicago to the most glamorous stages on earth, he carved a path fueled by vision, ego, genius, and chaos. He turned heartbreak into platinum. He turned controversy into attention. And somehow, amidst the storms, he built an empire worth billions. Fashion, music, business, scandal, legacy. Kanye is not a man you simply understand. He's a force you survive. This is not just the story of a musician. This is the story of a man who believes he's more than human. This is Kanye West. Chapter 1. The boy who dreamed louder. Before the designer shoes, the presidential bids, and the billion-dollar brands, there was a kid in Chicago, scribbling rhymes in notebooks no one cared to read. Kanye Omari West was born on June 8, 1977, in Atlanta, Georgia. His parents divorced when he was just 3 years old. His mother, Donda, a professor of English, moved with him to Chicago, a city that would carve itself deep into his DNA. While many kids his age were caught up in cartoons and toys, Kanye was immersed in poetry, art, and beats. His house was filled with words, books, and ideas. Donda didn't just raise him, she built him, intellectually, spiritually, and unapologetically. Growing up in the South Side wasn't easy. He wasn't a gangster, and he didn't want to be. He was a dreamer, something far more dangerous in a world that tries to crush dreams early. He wore pink polos when the streets screamed for baggy jeans. He spoke with passion when others stayed silent. He refused to be invisible. In high school, Kanye's love for music intensified. He started producing tracks at just 13 years old, stealing moments in basements and home studios, teaching himself how to layer sounds, how to build something from nothing. He didn't have the money for expensive equipment. He didn't have the right connections, but he had an obsession, one so intense that it made sleep seem irrelevant. He briefly attended Chicago State University, where his mother taught, but the classroom couldn't contain him. Kanye dropped out, not because he lacked ambition, but because his ambition no longer fit inside a textbook. The beats in his head were louder than the lectures. He didn't want to learn about the world. He wanted to change it. By the time he was 20, Kanye had already started making beats for local artists, and word was beginning to spread. This kid was different. He could flip a soul sample like nobody else. His sound was warm, emotional, and cinematic. You could feel the hunger behind every drum kick. But producers weren't supposed to rap, and rappers weren't supposed to sound like this. Everyone told him to stay behind the boards. Make the hits, don't be the star. But Kanye couldn't be background noise in anyone's song. He knew something they didn't. The world wasn't ready for him. But he was more than ready for the world. This was the ignition, the spark, the moment when Kanye West, just a kid with headphones and a broken mic, began walking a path that would turn him into a cultural supernova. Chapter 2. Beats, Rejection, and Unshakable Faith. Kanye West didn't knock on the music industry's door. He banged on it, screamed through it, and when it didn't open, he built his own entrance. By the early 2000s, Kanye had become one of the most promising young producers in hip-hop. His unique style of sampling soulful vocals, especially from old R&B records, and layering them over hard-hitting drums gave him a signature no one could ignore. He was the architect behind tracks for Jay-Z's The Blueprint, including the legendary Izzo, HOVA. That album became an instant classic, and Kanye's phone started ringing more than ever. But there was a problem. He didn't just want to make beats, he wanted to rap. The industry laughed. Literally, labels saw Kanye as a producer only, not a rapper, not a frontman. He didn't fit the image. He wasn't street enough. He wore designer backpacks, not bulletproof vests. His lyrics talked about education, heartbreak, and ambition, not gang violence. In an era ruled by gangsta rap, Kanye was considered too soft, too strange, too different. Def Jam wasn't interested. Rockefeller Records, even after all the hits he gave them, hesitated. To them, Kanye rapping was like asking a painter to become a ballerina. Technically possible, but not worth betting on. But Kanye had something more dangerous than talent. He had certainty. He used every spare second to craft his own songs, recording late at night after studio sessions for other artists. He used his own money, begged favors, and slept little. Every beat he sold was fuel for his dream. He kept showing up, with demos, with new tracks, with belief. Then, everything changed on October 23, 2002. Kanye was driving home from a late-night session when his car collided head-on with another vehicle. He fractured his jaw in 3 places. Most people would have paused, reconsidered, taken time to heal. Kanye went straight to the studio. With his jaw wired shut, swollen, and bruised, he recorded through the wire, a raw, autobiographical track about the crash, the pain, and his refusal to be silenced. He literally rapped through his injuries. It wasn't just a song, it was a declaration of war against doubt. The track started spreading, first in mixtapes, then on the streets, then in offices. Executives started paying attention, not just to the producer, but to the storyteller. Eventually, Rockefeller gave him a deal, partially out of pressure, partially out of guilt, but mostly because they realized something. Kanye West wasn't going away. This wasn't a hobby. This was destiny with a beat. Chapter 3: The College Dropout. Art, Ego, and Breakthrough. When Kanye West released The College Dropout in 2004, the world didn't just get a debut album, it got a manifesto. At a time when mainstream rap was dominated by gangsta bravado, Kanye arrived with pink polos, backpacks, and a sound that felt like it had been waiting underground for years, just waiting for someone brave enough to make it loud. He wasn't trying to be someone else. He was trying to be himself, and that changed everything. The album was soulful, political, spiritual, and vulnerable all at once. He rapped about working at the Gap, about battling self-doubt, about faith, about capitalism, and about family. The sound was built on sped-up soul samples that felt nostalgic and futuristic at the same time. Tracks like All Falls Down, Jesus Walks, and Spaceship didn't just speak to listeners, they screamed for them. Kanye had taken his scars, stitched them into a tapestry of sound, and handed it to the world with both hands. And the world? It listened. But behind the curtains of this critical success was a tornado of pressure. Kanye wasn't just trying to prove he could rap. He was trying to prove that his entire identity had value. He was a middle-class, art school dropout who dressed preppy and quoted philosophers. In an industry that rewarded street credibility, Kanye weaponized creativity. His ego? Massive, but it was the only armor he had against a world that tried to box him in. His refusal to conform became his superpower. At award shows, in interviews, and even in his own lyrics, Kanye was unapologetic. He knew he wasn't just building an album, he was building a legacy. The College Dropout wasn't a stepping stone. It was a declaration of war against mediocrity, against expectation, and against silence. The album earned him 10 Grammy nominations and 3 wins, including Best Rap Album. But more importantly, it cracked open the idea of what a rapper could look like, sound like, and speak like. Kanye didn't just change hip-hop. He opened the door for artists who didn't fit the mold to walk through it, proudly. And all of it started with the courage to say, "No, I won't finish college. I'll finish this instead." Bonus 1. 808s, Heartbreaks, and Lego. Between the Grammys and the grandeur, the awards and the arrogance, there was a moment. Quiet, unexpected, and weirdly adorable. It was 2008. Kanye had just lost his mother, Donda West, the woman who raised him, believed in him, protected him. His relationship with Alexis had ended. The world saw Kanye acting out, breaking down on stage, crying mid-performance. But what they didn't see was the Lego. Yup, in the middle of grief and chaos, Kanye, millionaire, icon, designer of sounds, sat down alone in his apartment and built a massive Lego city. Entire skylines, streets, a miniature utopia with no critics, no labels, no interviews, just bricks. Colorful, perfect, silent bricks. A friend who visited said it was like walking into a child's imagination. There was a Yeezy tower, a Kanye museum, a Donda park at the center. He was creating a world he could control, a place where no one died, where love didn't leave, where everything fit, clicked, and stayed together. And while everyone was mocking his emo phase and auto-tune experiments, Kanye was building something else. 808s and Heartbreak, an album that would change music forever. Drake, Kid Cudi, The Weeknd, Travis Scott. Every emotional, moody, melodic rapper you know, they owe a piece of their sound to that album. But before that revolution, there was just Kanye, a broken man, surrounded by tiny plastic cities, trying to rebuild his own. And in a way, he did, because 808s wasn't just an album, it was grief. Encoded, processed, transformed. He didn't go to therapy. He didn't sit down with Oprah. He played with Legos, and somehow that was enough. Chapter 4. Graduation. The bright lights and the bigger stage. After 2 groundbreaking albums, Kanye West had climbed the ranks of hip-hop royalty, but that wasn't enough for him. He wasn't content with rap acclaim. He wanted to bend genres, shift culture, and turn himself into a global phenomenon. That hunger became the heartbeat of his 3rd studio album, Graduation. This was not just another album. It was a full-blown artistic pivot. Kanye abandoned the soul samples that defined the college dropout and late registration and embraced electronic synths, arena rock vibes, and international appeal. He was looking beyond the streets of Chicago and aiming for the entire planet. Influenced by stadium acts like U2 and Daft Punk, Graduation was Kanye standing on a mountaintop, shouting into the future. And then came the now legendary face-off with 50 Cent. In 2007, both artists agreed to release their albums on the same day, Kanye's Graduation versus 50 Cent's Curtis. It wasn't just a sales battle, it was a symbolic duel between the old guard of gangsta rap and the new wave of introspective, experimental hip-hop. The media ate it up. Fans took sides. It felt like hip-hop itself was at a crossroads. Kanye won. Graduation outsold Curtis in the first week, marking a cultural turning point. The message was clear. Vulnerability, creativity, and ambition had triumphed over bravado. Hip-hop was evolving, and Kanye West was its catalyst. The album's visuals matched its sound. Bright colors, surreal animations, and a new mascot. The Dropout Bear, reimagined by Japanese artist Takashi Murakami. Kanye was blending music, fashion, and visual art like no one before. Stronger, his hit single featuring Daft Punk, became an anthem, not just for clubs, but for ambition. The lyrics, that don't kill me can only make me stronger, echoed through gyms, stadiums, and offices. He had crafted a cultural weapon. Behind the scenes, however, Kanye was still a storm. Fame had amplified his ego. He was walking red carpets with a sense of divine purpose, speaking his mind unapologetically and clashing with the press, with award show hosts, and sometimes with his own reflection. But for every outburst, there was a moment of brilliance, an idea, a beat, a design that reminded the world why he was worth listening to. Graduation wasn't just Kanye's next step. It was his leap into the stratosphere. He wasn't aiming to be the best rapper anymore. He wanted to be the biggest artist in the world. And this was his global launch pad. With the charts conquered, the critics silenced, and the audience captivated, Kanye had officially graduated. But as we would soon see, the higher you rise, the thinner the air becomes, and Kanye wasn't done climbing. Chapter 5. 808s and Heartbreak. The price of everything. Fame had given Kanye the world, but it hadn't taught him how to hold it together. In 2007, just as Graduation was cementing his legacy, Kanye's universe collapsed in ways that no accolade could mend. His mother, Donda West, the woman who had been his anchor, his cheerleader, his compass, passed away unexpectedly following surgery. Days later, his engagement to Alexis Pfeiffer, his longtime partner, dissolved. And for the first time in his life, Kanye wasn't in control. He vanished from the public eye, not into silence, but into a studio. But what emerged wasn't the Kanye the world knew. Gone were the clever bars, the chipmunk soul samples, the confident declarations of greatness. What came instead was 808s and Heartbreak, an album that sounded like a transmission from the other side of grief. Kanye traded raps for robotic melodies, bars for auto-tuned wails. He leaned on the Roland TR 808 drum machine, which gave the album its cold, pulsating heart. The lyrics were simple, often repetitive, but that was the point. They weren't trying to impress. They were trying to survive. It was a seismic shift. Fans were divided. Critics were confused. Kanye wasn't trying to entertain them. He was bleeding in front of them. Songs like Welcome to Heartbreak, Coldest Winter, and Say You Will weren't tracks. They were confessions. And in a genre built on bravado, Kanye stood naked, mechanical, and human at once. This wasn't just a musical experiment. It was a blueprint for a generation. Years later, artists like Drake, Kid Cudi, The Weeknd, and Frank Ocean would credit 808s and Heartbreak as a defining influence. Kanye had accidentally opened the floodgates for emotional vulnerability in mainstream hip-hop, but at the time, it looked like a risk bordering on career suicide. He didn't care. He was in pain, and this was his therapy. The stage lights had dimmed, the crowd had blurred, and for a brief moment, Kanye stopped performing and simply existed. The visuals around the album echoed the tone: cold colors, geometric forms, a lone broken heart. He wore tailored suits, gloves, and emotionless stares. He looked like a man trapped inside his own mind, trying to translate suffering into sound. And he succeeded. In hindsight, 808s and Heartbreak didn't just mark the end of a chapter, it marked the end of Kanye's former self. The young, eager producer from Chicago who once wanted to prove himself to Jay-Z and the industry had died with his mother. What remained was something more unpredictable, more artistic, more volatile. Kanye wasn't a rapper anymore. He was something else now. A creative force that couldn't be categorized. A man who had learned that even if you have everything, grief finds a way in. And when it does, it changes your sound forever. Chapter 6. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. The Genius and the Mirror. After the chaos, after the public crucifixion, after losing his mother and losing control, Kanye disappeared. But he wasn't gone. He was building. In 2010, Kanye West re-emerged, not as a rapper, not as a producer, but as a myth. And that myth had a soundtrack, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. This wasn't just an album. It was a manifesto, a cinematic redemption arc, a palace of sound built from pain, arrogance, shame, and brilliance. He flew his collaborators to Hawaii. No phones allowed. Dress code, elite. Rules. You show up, you contribute, or you leave. This wasn't a studio, it was a sanctum. Kanye became the director of a sonic opera, guiding rappers, singers, and musicians like a mad conductor. Jay-Z, Nicki Minaj, Bon Iver, Rick Ross, Pusha T, Kid Cudi. Each of them became instruments in a larger composition. Every note, every verse, every breath was crafted, dissected, polished. This was not a mixtape. It was architecture. The album opens with Nicki Minaj playing the role of a twisted British narrator, welcoming us into a dream world made of luxury and madness. Then comes Power. Kanye staring into the camera, blood dripping, crown tilted, daring anyone to take his throne. Then there's Runaway. A single piano note repeating like a warning bell. Kanye toasting himself. Let's have a toast for the douchebags. It was an apology and an anthem, a confession and a celebration. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was owning the chaos. And all of the lights, monster, devil in a new dress, blame game. Each track layered with rage, beauty, ego, genius. The production was operatic, the visuals baroque. This wasn't hip-hop anymore. This was Renaissance art. And then came the film, a 30-minute surrealist short, directed by Kanye himself. A phoenix falls to earth. She meets him. They dance, they feast, they fall in love. Society rejects her. She burns. It's part fashion film, part hallucination, part myth. He wasn't just releasing music. He was building a universe. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy became an instant classic, not because it was perfect, but because it embraced imperfection. It danced with shame. It celebrated ego. It mourned loss. It was the moment Kanye proved he didn't need to be understood. He needed to be seen. This chapter wasn't about climbing back to the top. It was about burning the map and redrawing the mountain. By the end, he wasn't just in the game. He was the one designing the board. Bonus 2. The fashion fiasco that turned into a fortune. While most people know Kanye West for his music and others for his controversies, there's a chapter in his life that blends fashion, risk, and outright madness. His infamous Yeezy fashion debut in Paris. It wasn't smooth. In fact, it was nearly catastrophic. In 2011, Kanye decided to launch his first women's wear line at Paris Fashion Week. The fashion elite held their breath, not with excitement, but skepticism. How could a rapper, even one with as much cultural clout as Kanye, possibly enter the high temple of haute couture and be taken seriously? But Kanye, as always, ignored the noise. He threw millions of his own dollars into production, self-funding everything, from the design team to the venue, to the luxurious materials used. No investors, no backers, just Ye, his vision, and his wallet. He even had Giuseppe Zanotti collaborate on custom heels for the show. When the lights dimmed and the models stepped onto the runway, the reaction wasn't what he hoped for. Critics called the line overdone, confused, and not ready. One outlet called it a celebrity's vanity project gone wrong. The show was met with harsh reviews, and it stung Kanye deeply. Most people would retreat, lick their wounds, and never touch fashion again. But this is Kanye West. Instead of walking away, he dove deeper. He began obsessing over the architecture of clothing, the psychology of style, the philosophy of minimalism. He wasn't trying to make fashion, he was trying to reshape it. His creative ego refused to let the failure define him. He kept building, studying, experimenting, until he found a new formula. Years later, he launched Yeezys Season 1 in collaboration with Adidas. Unlike his first show, this one wasn't a flop. It was a phenomenon. Yeezy sneakers sold out in seconds. The minimalist aesthetic, once mocked, became streetwear gospel. Celebrities and influencers wore his designs like uniforms. And that fashion failure in Paris? It turned into a billion-dollar empire. Sometimes, what looks like delusion is just vision waiting for time to catch up. Chapter 7. Yeezys, the king with no crown. If my beautiful, dark, twisted fantasy was the palace, then Yeezys was the wrecking ball. Kanye had climbed the mountain. He had reached artistic divinity. But instead of building higher, he smashed everything. In 2013, he dropped Yeezys, an album that felt more like a punch to the chest than music. It was raw, metallic, angry, minimalist. No pretty strings, no lush arrangements, just distorted synths, broken rhythms, and Kanye screaming into the void. He wasn't chasing hits anymore. He was chasing impact. From the first seconds of On Sight, it was clear this wasn't the Kanye people were used to. This was confrontation. This was chaos bottled and unleashed. And behind it all, a message: I don't care what you think anymore. He was frustrated with the fashion world that refused to let him in, with the music industry that wanted him to stay in a box, with the public who applauded the spectacle but ignored the soul beneath. So Kanye became his own revolution. In New Slaves, he rapped about consumerism and systemic racism with venom in his voice. In Black Skinhead, he sounded like a gladiator in a stadium, roaring over tribal drums. It wasn't comfortable. That was the point. The visuals were stripped down too. One of the first promotional events? A projection of his face rapping New Slaves on 66 buildings around the world. No press release, no commercial, just anger, broadcasted in stone and light. Touring Yeezus became a theatrical ritual. Kanye wore elaborate masks that hid his face, like a god in exile. The stage looked like an alien mountain, with a figure in white, a Jesus-like actor, occasionally appearing, watching over him. Symbolism everywhere. No apologies. And then, the interviews. Chaotic. Legendary. He screamed about fashion, about Walt Disney, about being the nucleus of culture, about leather jogging pants and breaking barriers. He was mocked, memed, misunderstood. But underneath it all, one truth remained. He wasn't crazy. He was boiling. Kanye saw the invisible gatekeepers. He saw the doors closed to black designers, to rappers who dared dream beyond music. And rather than ask for a seat at the table, he set fire to the entire room. Yeezus divided fans. Critics debated it endlessly, but it didn't matter. Kanye had entered his villain era, not the kind that twirls a mustache, but the kind that demands the system burn before it changes. And somehow, amid all the rage, something else was brewing, a new empire. Because while Yeezus was pure rebellion, behind the scenes, Kanye was negotiating his way into fashion's highest towers. The walls were cracking. He just needed one more push. Chapter 8. Yeezy, from madman to mogul. He was done asking. Now he was building. After years of pounding on doors that wouldn't open, Kanye did what no one expected. He created his own. And through that door walked Yeezy, a brand that would change fashion, sneakers, and wealth in pop culture forever. It started with Nike. The Air Yeezys dropped like lightning. Limited, hyped, instantly sold out. But there was a problem. Nike didn't treat him like a creator. They refused royalties. No percentage. Just thanks for the buzz. So Kanye walked straight into Adidas. It was 2013. Adidas was struggling to keep up with Nike. Kanye was a wild card. But when they met, boom, the perfect storm. Adidas gave him creative control, royalties, and most importantly, respect. The result? The Yeezy Boost 750. The sneaker world exploded. Yeezy wasn't just a shoe. It was an event, a movement. Lines wrapped around stores. Resale prices went nuclear. And Kanye, for the first time, had ownership. A piece of the pie. He called it the apple of fashion. And it didn't stop with sneakers. He launched Yeezy Season. Clothing lines that blurred the line between streetwear and high fashion. Neutral tones, oversized silhouettes, futuristic dystopia vibes. Critics laughed. Fashion elites rolled their eyes, then copied him. By 2020, Yeezy was pulling in over $1.5 billion a year. Forbes officially called Kanye a billionaire. He celebrated by tweeting one word, billionaire, with a smiley face made out of goats. He had done it. The kid from the South Side who was too loud, too arrogant, too emotional, had built a brand bigger than himself, bigger than rap, bigger than fashion. And yet, it wasn't just about money. Yeezy was his legacy, his proof that black artists could own their work, that creativity could be an empire, that you didn't need to be accepted by the gatekeepers to become one yourself. There were stumbles, of course, controversies, outbursts, alliances, and fallouts. But at the core, one thing never changed. Kanye believed in Kanye, even when no one else did. And that belief built a kingdom, not made of gold or platinum, but of foam soles, cotton blends, and vision. It was messy, unfiltered, flawed, but it was his. From sampling beats in a bedroom to rewriting the rules of fashion and wealth, Kanye West didn't just chase the American dream. He remixed it.